It's a way to connect a whole bunch of these AI assistants. It doesn't matter what type of AI assistant you have to where the data lives.
Lists on GitHub of people who've set up like standard connections with Notion, with anything that has a markdown.
Anthropic has a pre-built server there for Slack.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 5th, 2024. You're watching the Daily AI Show live. With me today, we have Beth, Karl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And the topic for today's show is about Anthropic's recent MCP, also known as Model Context Protocol. And if you're wondering, okay, what's that? What are you guys going to talk about today? I think I have just and I'm going to throw it to the experts here on the call. But this is the analogy I have to you. Like, so imagine if your phone or every app on your phone needed a different charger. That's how messy it is with AI, like with AI connections today. And if you had a universal connector, that's just kind of that worked with everything. That's the idea behind Anthropic's MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's sort of a easy way to do it, or think of it as the USB-C plug now to everything, right? So that's sort of the context to start this conversation, and it is why it's a big deal, why it's been all over the news now for probably about 2 weeks. But as always, we like to see what comes out. We like to see what people are doing on it. Usually there's people that are doing innovative things on X. I've seen videos where people have connected to a Brave browser, used their Claude desktop app and connected directly to the internet, as well as many, many other ways you can connect to local databases. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about the MCP. And who wants to kick this conversation off from our side of things?
I can give it a start. Okay. So I'm going to read to you what Anthropic put on their blog, and then maybe break it down a little bit from a business perspective, where I'm kind of seeing it from, but also from a local perspective. So the Model Context Protocol is, like Brian said, it's a way to connect a whole bunch of these AI assistants. It doesn't matter what type of AI assistant you have to where the data lives, right? So content repositories, business tools, development environments, and so on. So really what we're looking at here is a very simple way to maintain a single standard protocol, reduces any type of technical overhead. And really, because we're in a world now that there isn't just one AI tool that people are using, right? There's more likely more than one. And so how can you get all these things all together? So I'm going to give you an example here. I thought it was a neat example. So this person, Pietro Cirano, connected Claude to I believe it's the Evertai API. And so it'll let Claude generate images from that repository only. So let's see it in action.
There's no audio right at the moment.
No, there's no audio. There's no audio, right? So for those who are listening, essentially what's happening is this person is using Claude to generate images. Now it's connected via the MCP server to the Evertai. Essentially, you can connect to any database. So this database has a bunch of the stored images. So what this person is doing is calling those images via prompts, and then it's just essentially retrieving those images. So the first thing the person create a 35 millimeter camera photo of a spaceship landing on Mars. And then there is the storage of that image.
Okay, I have a quick question here because I want to make sure I understand this. is it pulling, I mean, in this example, I know there's many examples we could talk about on the show. Is this pulling images that already exist on this database? In other words, this right now we're looking at a picture of looks like a spaceship on Mars, right? Is it pulling this image that's already been created, or is it connecting to an API that's generating like flux, generating the image?
Yes, it is connected to the EverArt flux that generates that image. So,
So
right,
creating
right.
that's why we say now creating a 35 millimeter camcorder of a spaceship leading. Oh, I didn't even realize it said on landing on Mars. That's what it looks like. Landing on Mars, and then it's creating it and then bringing it back to you.
Bringing it back. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
As long as you're connecting, literally you can connect it to anything, and you can use essentially Claude as the way to retrieve that information. So whether you want to use something else to generate the image, whether you want to, here's a really easy business use case. Let's say for a business, they have thousands upon thousands of images. Whether you're, it doesn't matter if it's a marketing company, really any company has a load of, could be designs, could be architectural designs, whatever it is. You can pull from that using the MCP protocol. Now, from an image perspective, it's a little difficult because I don't know the capability of Claude to be able to, the recognition of images is pulling. So I would test that. I wouldn't know. So that's something interesting to test out. But also, if you can connect really to any database, when I talk about local use case, imagine you connecting your Claude to your entire local, like your own folders, and being able to pull those things up. That's pretty awesome. Now, you've probably seen it if you think about what ChatGPT has, right? It's connectors to Google Drive, OneDrive, and so on. But I think with this, now I have to double check this, is that you can actually connect this. It'll pull all, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need a separate connector for every single one of those. It just pulls it as a whole.
Well,
in your local.
no, I'm going to correct that a little bit. You have to, it's a very simple process, but you have to establish an MCP server to be the middleware between the LLM and whatever services out there that you want to do it, whether it's local or it's on the web via an API. But it's easy. Like in code, that MCP server is like 4 lines, and there's some magic behind the scenes there that Anthropic has built to make this a really easy, standardized way to connect anything. And where I think this threatens is, companies that have been these middleware integrators between LLMs and any kind of AI and basic services like Google Drive and so on. And I'm going to name Respell, Make, Zapier. This tool, the MCP server model that they've built, makes it so easy for a person with basic developer skills to create an MCP server connection to anything. And then the LLM, in this case, Claude Desktop, which is the first and I think only one that is kind of publicly enabled to do this work. The Bedrock platform also, because of the tight connection between Amazon Bedrock and Anthropic, also is enabled to do this work. So you can actually use the MCP client server system with Bedrock against a whole host of other models that they provide. But that's typically open source. Anthropic built an open source protocol. So I doubt that OpenAI is going to use it. But anybody who's using OpenAI can build their own integration using the protocol so that OpenAI's models could actually do the same thing that the Claude Desktop can do right now. So what it does is it then makes this seamless and continuous integration with anything you're using. Slack. Anthropic has a pre-built server there for Slack. So if you want to ask Claude Desktop in your workplace, what did CEO Joe say, a few weeks ago about this. It has access to all of that without having to, use somebody else's third-party integration like Respell or Make or Zapier.
Which is really super cool because, just like, what was it, ODBC connectors back in the 90s and how it connected computers, that's like kind of what we're doing with AI now, right? And so Claude is smart. It's smart to create something that's a universal connector, because what they're essentially saying is, hey, you've looked and seen what our intent is with agentic workflows on your computer using computer, what do they call that? Computer flow or something like that. They have a term for it for Anthropic. We saw that. And yeah, like computer use. And then you have the desktop app. Now you have the MCP. And so now what you're ultimately saying is, hey, if we have this universal connector that can easily from the Claude desktop app point and connect to different places, a la Slack. Hey, what did Beth say the next idea for next week's show is? And I could just talk to Claude about it. But even better than that, it's a bigger tool, right, Andy? Because like, sure, I want to retrieve that data, but okay, couldn't I just do that in Slack? I would imagine anybody listening to the show right now is going, but why would I ask Claude? Well, just like you would in a Perplexity or something like that, you might have follow-up questions on that. So then Beth says, it comes back to me in the Claude desktop and it says, oh, Beth suggested MCP as well, that wouldn't be a great one for Claude because it's not connected to the internet. But let's just say it was like some topic, AI automations or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, immediately after gathering that information from essentially a database, we're getting it from Claude, I could also have it connected locally to a database of all of our transcripts, all of our summaries, keywords, all that stuff for every show. And I could also do follow-up questions immediately with Claude, leveraging the power of the LLM to begin with, Sonnet 3.5, Haiku, Opus, right? And I can immediately put all that together and say, given what I just learned about what Beth had said in Slack, let's do some additional research, and let's also make sure we're bringing in when we talked about this last, so that I have a good comprehensive view as a co-host about when we talked about AI automations, what's coming up latest on it and what I might want to know for this upcoming conversation. I never leave the Claude desktop to do that. In the future sense, then we're also adding it to computer use, and we're talking about having it go and do some other, connecting things down the road. We're not there yet, but that's where I see it's going.
So I watched a video demo of a developer who used a couple of different tools. That one of them, both of them are pre-built MCP servers that are on the Anthropic site. So you can just download those, or you just copy and paste them into your own local. He had to open terminal and put together a little Python script to do this, but it was very simple, and Claude could tell you how to do it, right? Anyway, he connected to a server that is out there called Brave, which is a web search server. It's an API. And so it does have, that gave his Claude desktop or native ability to search the web, right? And then in addition, he added the file system MCP server. And the file system is on your computer, whether it's a PC or a Mac, and the file system is your file structure. So what he did was he just made a simple demonstration that allowed him then to ask Claude to go out, find this information on the web, and then write it to a file. And there, it just does that naturally. And then, as Brian points out, you could ask questions about that content because it's looking at the file system and it's looking at the web, and it has all of that information available to it. So the TLDR of all of this is the MCP, this client server architecture in a simplified model, makes it possible for a smart LLM that can code. Claude 3.5 Sonnet's a great coder. It can speak any language. It can go out and look at websites. Now it can do anything you ask it to do by setting up these little MCP servers. It'll write on your desktop. It'll open up an application. Eventually, it is foundational to agents using LLMs as the driving force and the smart interface for you. So you just talk to your LLM. it spawns up all of this data collection. It has access to these tools, and that's important to be a good agent for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly, I like that you called it the TLDR. It was like, we should have either side shows or side videos that are called the TLDR for like everything that's going on in the week. I think it's a good idea. What I would say about it, Andy, is, when I worked in data analytics prior to my current position at Scaled, I worked for a data analytics company. And while I was not the person writing SQL code, I was working in other aspects of the company. That's the people that were I was literally in an office. So those are the people that were in my office in Tampa. Still people that I really enjoy talking to and stuff, that super smart when it came to that. And they were doing left, concatenations, less justified. They were in SQL, and I learned a little along the way, and got some certifications along the way with different tools. But one of the things that I remember more than anything is when you use these data analytics tools like ClickSense, like ThoughtSpot, like Looker, and others that were out there, that what you were doing a lot of times is you're looking at 4 or 5 different data sets. And what those tools did well is they created what were called synthetic keys. And essentially it was, if you imagine 3 separate tables, super simple, and one has names and a second column would be like what the person bought. Then there's another table that doesn't have names and what they bought, but might have names and the date of purchase. And then there's a third table that only has date of purchase and a unique identified SKU number or something like that, right? So no one table has all the stuff you need. And so these tools, in a very fun sort of blobby way, ClickSense was really great. Like when you got the tools together, they would go bloop, and then make this look on the thing. It was very satisfying. Like to the visual of that, or like, oh, I'm connecting things. What they were doing though was creating these synthetic keys that drove the lines between these databases. And what I get excited about is that idea. I don't know what's possible yet because I haven't dug in and really truly tried that. But I believe that Claude would actually be able to do those types of operations. That becomes very powerful, not only for I think people want to immediately go to, oh, enterprises will use it. No, I think people will use this very quickly. They'll learn how to use this for their own needs, whether it's be in sales or whatever, because you're going to be able to say, look, I can connect to 3 or 4 different disparate data sets that would routinely be siloed, but they're on my computer. They're just not talking to each other. And now I have this really smart LLM that can not only connect the dots correctly between these data sets, but now I can ask questions about it. Now I can become more informed. Now I can push or pull from Slack, and so on and so on and so on. Or like you said, connect to Brave. That gets me really excited. And I think, to your point, it's the direct path towards their agentic workflows, because right now we're giving individual permissions and we're saying, yes, it's okay to do this. In the future, we'll say, yes, it's okay between this parameter and this parameter, and it will just go and do. And those agentic workflows will happen.
I think even before agents, there is there's different opportunity. Like there's the one thing why I'm excited about this is we have a municipal client that this is one of the things I want to explore with them. If you think about like any business or really any government, they have a whole bunch of local files, databases, systems, GIS systems, whatever it is, large data sets of everything. So if you can have the ability of your AI systems to connect to all those data points or data places where all that data lives, well, guess what? Now you have like access to it in real time where you can ask against it in there's so many ways that you could do it, from internal to serving your citizens to serving, any kind of stakeholders. And yeah, it allows that is the eventual step to agents, but it's like just the ability to be able to pull that, because as like any business, it takes forever. It's like, hey, could you find me this, or like the example you were saying, Brian, was, oh, could you let me know the stats of last year, month over month, about this campaign? Well, you're gonna have to go take at least 20 minutes, maybe an hour to go find it, put together a report, versus, hey, ChatGPT, I need this month over month of this to this to this. Also, can you do an analysis?
Chart and do a
Can you
chart.
do a chart?
Yeah, right.
I kind of need it right now. Oh, perfect. Or we all know you always have to do these reports for a presentation. Well, why don't you pull that report and do the presentation? Like create the graph while you're in the presentation. That changes up, right?
Yeah, it's just in time information. It allows people to drill down, which is what these data analytics tools have always been able to allow you to do. That was the brilliance of them, was you went from static reports. I've talked about this before, where the old pain point was we knew because we had people who we were working with, and they would work forever to create the perfect presentation. And they walk in the door to Beth, and Beth is sitting at the conference table, and Beth naturally, as like the executive or the leader or whatever that they're reporting to, looks at the chart and go, well, what about this? And in the old ways, you were sunk. The only answer to that was, we'll go back and look at that, Beth. It's, and we'll get that back to you. We'll have that for our next meeting. That's the end of that conversation back then. And then with these genius of these smart data analytics tools, which I've always said, if you want to follow AI, follow business intelligence, because they were doing this in 2017 and prior. I know because I was using the tools. We was machine learning. We weren't calling it AI, and we didn't have LLMs, but we had this ability. And now Beth, going back to that example, goes, well, what about this? And they go, yeah, let's just drill down into that, Beth, and answer your question right now. It was no longer about static reports. So I like what you're saying, Karl. It's this just-in-time reporting that you're using Claude or whatever the tool is to create these dynamic presentations that are pretty much built and up to the date to about the 30 seconds before you walked in the door, if not dynamically adjusting while you're there. So if you're giving a presentation to somebody like Beth, who's a CEO or executive, you can be sure that whatever was created and put together is going to be the best and the most powerful information. Or Karl, like you said to yours, like the example of the client you have that's into custom home building.
Yep.
I can think of about 1,000 different ways this would be an outstanding tool for something like that.
Following the business intelligence example, I can tell you from having done this in the same time frame that you're talking about for Life Aid Beverage Company, that previously what you had to do was, in order to use one of these business intelligence tools that didn't have separate integrations with every single repository of information, your CRM, your financial system, what you had to do was you had to transport all of that data into a single Redshift or SQL repository. And then the interface, the business intelligence interface, could do queries and generate charts and so on against that single database. MCP makes it possible for Claude Desktop now to have separate connectors to every one of those systems and absorb all of those things at the time that you make the question to the assistant. So it's going to go and collect those things because it has full real-time access to all of those. I want to just quickly address a question or an issue that Gwyn raised in the chat, which is, hey, wait, if you can connect this thing with continuous connection to the internet, well, isn't that a little sketchy and dangerous? Well, in the MCP system, when you enable Claude Desktop to do that, it challenges you every time it goes to any one of these MCP servers. It says, you're asking to go to this service out here. Is it okay just this once? Or do you want to leave this open? Or I approve it this one time. So it does this sort of gauge and block that is going to pop up every time. It can be annoying, but it is important that Anthropic thought about that, worried about the same thing you're worried about, and makes it so that you have to give permissions each time it goes out to get the information.
And by the way, that's just like custom GPTs, right? Like if you do like access permissions, it does the same exact thing to a fault. I mean, Karl and I, over a year ago at this point, had like painful late night sharing sessions where we're like, why won't it just send this information over to Slack? It clearly had the ability through their connector inside custom GPT. But what, Karl? I mean, Beth is the early days. It would send half the information. It would send none of the information. Every single time it wanted permissions. The permissions didn't work. So like, this isn't new. I just want to call that out, that this isn't new for Anthropic to have these permission controls. But the fact that these are run exclusively on local servers or local computers does provide that additional layer of security, at least at this point, through basically physical isolation, right? I mean, you're essentially isolating these, and through security controls. Back to your point, Andy, you're specifically saying when and for how long this can be accessed, which is important because, to your point, what I might do in a session is say, Claude, go get this. Claude, go get this. Claude, go get this. Okay, now that this is all in your context window, now let's have a conversation about it. So I might pull from 5 or 6 different independent places, giving independent access at that moment to those places, those databases, or Brave or Slack or whatever. And then I'm like, great, we've just pulled in this information. That's the root of what I want to talk about. Now I can have these really deep conversations about it. Or if I was a sales leader, I could turn around and say, given all of this information, the transcripts, the cold calls, yada, 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 of my newest sales rep, now that I understand everything, and it took me 5 minutes to pull, now help me, Claude, now help me put together an 8-week plan, a course correction plan for this new rep who's having trouble closing the deal. They're great when they get on the call. They have great personality, but their numbers aren't there. But I've got all this data. Now help me put a plan together that I can immediately turn to this person. This is how they learn best, so I can help this rep get to the numbers and be satisfied to it. That's super powerful. And I think people are going to realize this awful quick if they haven't already, because they're going to see this as their local own super agent that's sitting on their computer that they're going to succeed. They're going to do well. And their companies are going to notice that they have this ability to make their, rise all boats. Rising tides lift all boats. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. I'm excited.
I think
about it.
the one thing that it's still, and I think Anthropic, I read somewhere that they will provide another beta for specific like enterprise environments, because it's, if you can see, this is a lot like focused on local, but if you have cloud native environments or really high throughput like if you're sending a lot of data across, multiple searches and so on, I think, don't know if that's how it'll respond to that. And so I think like there's an enterprise version coming of this. So I'm really, that's where it's exciting to see, we can we, all of us can, and everyone who's listening or watching can create their own MCP on their local devices, local computers, and so on. But to do this on a massive scale, like, I don't know, 500 employees and up, it'd be very interesting if that happens, or if somebody comes out, because I can only assume there'll be other AI labs that will be putting some sort of their version of this. Because this isn't, while we talk about it, this isn't the most straightforward, easy to comprehend. Just any person can be like, oh, I now know an MCP. Like, it's not. But when will we get to the point where the connections are all pretty much seamless in a big and small environment?
There are like lists on GitHub of people who've set up like standard connections with Notion, with anything that has a markdown thing, like an Obsidian note taker, those sorts of things. We have some questions in the chat about safety. So you were talking about the permissions. Do the permissions control prevent hacking while you're in a session? What is the safety aspects of this? Particularly if what you're doing is connecting to an internet, like connecting to a data source that is on the internet.
I think that's where the issues are, right? Because it's local first connection. So the thought was, if you contain your data locally, then again, like you said, just by proximity, and there's nothing. But if you do it online, I'm not sure. Connecting to their Brave browser and so on.
Well, you're operating through a browser-like connection, and there are security protocols built in there. If you're thinking that when you're connected to the internet, you're hackable, and when you're not connected to the internet, you're right. But, we're kind of always on connection to the internet, and it's a very difficult thing for, a nefarious actor to access your live session on your computer unless they've done some other kind of exploit and put some software on your computer.
That's what I
So
was gonna say.
if you're
Yeah.
worried about getting hacked during a session, you've already been hacked, right? I mean, if it's going to happen, you've already been hacked and you've got something that's monitoring your activity on your computer. And it's a local thing. It's not
Mhm.
somebody has an open connection from the web into your desktop.
Okay. So, so the protocol here is what it always is, right? Make sure that your local system is secure because that's the most likely
And we have
place.
your browsers use HTTPS, so that's the secure, protocol that, should maintain like a private connection between you and whatever services you're accessing on the internet. You can get hacked if you go to one that doesn't have that secure connection. So if just HTTP slash and then the website instead of the S that so take a look at that when you're looking at almost always you'll see that almost any legit web service has this S protocol in place.
Makes me think back to the times where it was like half and half, and you would go to websites and it'd only be the HTTP and not the S. I'm like, you don't see that anymore, but like, the days of things not working because it didn't have the S on the end of it or whatever the case may be. Um, I'll say this, like, and this is, I'll call this my PSA from, Uncle Brian. I feel like I do this every once in a while, but it's relevant. And that's like, I want to say like, hey kids, it's Uncle Brian. You need to get your data in order. You need to put your data, you need to clean your data. You need to take the time. We're doing it internally, by the way, at the Daily AI Show. So this is nothing that I would not say to ourselves. We literally had a conversation about this last night when it comes to internal data, because it is so easy for it to get messy. And one of the things that came up on the conversation was, what ultimately do we want this new data set that we're going to create to include? What metadata, what titles, what things are important to us, what keywords, so what subtopics, all of that. Like we had a whole conversation about this last night, and now we're going to set forth and organize the data probably the way we should have since day one. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know or what you're going to need, and so you learn along the way. Well, I bring this up because I want to make sure that people know that like this isn't something that we're not actively doing or think is important, but this just reinforces, like, look at the possibilities that we've in 20 and 32 minutes that we've already talked about of what you can do with like this new MCP with the Claude desktop, or not even just, by the way, we say Claude desktop quite a bit. That is not the only way you can use this. That is just one of the ways that you can use MCP. So you're not bound to that. But let's just assume it is Claude desktop. And you're like, wow, I have all these great ideas. What you don't want to find out is that you have a whole bunch of great ideas and data that just can't really be used because it's not sorted correctly. It's duplicative. It's messy on your own system. And so, look, if you have ideas and you're like, I don't know if I would deploy that today, tomorrow, or to Gwen's point, I don't know if I'm ready yet because I want to look into more of the security. That does not preclude you, does not stop you from putting the hard, boring, aggravating work that it's going to take to clean up the data that's there right now, whether that's on your local computers or if it's, it's a personal use case or a business use case. I, you know, yeah, exactly. Uncle Brian's AI PSA. Exactly right, Justin. This is like, I mean, I can't tell you how important this is, because what you don't want to find out with anything in AI that is all relied on data, whether it's future agent work or anything like that, what you don't want to find out is you weren't ready. Because what's going to happen is this stuff is going to happen faster than you realize. It's going to be quicker. You're going to see something get deployed. Sam Altman saying, AGI is coming faster than I think we realize. Does that mean 2025? I don't know. But you know what? If it does, be ready. Be ready. And the best way to be ready is to have your data organized in order, because whatever that solution is, you'll be able to deploy on it.
Before you change your work schedule today to go and work on cleaning your data, make sure you have an application idea for what that data is going to serve, because we ought to have been much more careful about transcripts and metadata for those transcripts, from the beginning, because we want to make anything that we've ever said accessible using AI. But you may not have that in your company or elsewhere. There may be already existing systems that maintain essentially clean data. Your CRM system, Slack does a good job of it. Those things are all really standardized and formalized in terms of their data structures. So, it's only where MCP is giving you the opportunity to actually create a database locally that's going to, be filled up now, instead of you having to kind of cut and paste and put things in notes or wherever. You can actually set up interactions with Perplexity or other LLMs. And importantly, right now, the one to try it with is Anthropic Claude Desktop. Uh, you could have Claude start to do conversations and have it be building a database of things that you're collecting that are coming from other sources on your computer, and you're normalizing that data into a single database. It can be Postgres SQL, or it can be SQLite. Those are like, free packages you can put on your computer to use as databases. So yeah, you can start to build a good and repurposable database. But going back and cleaning ancient data, in the possibility that you might want to use it in the future, I just don't want you guys to, change your leisure time too much to go out and do that. But it is required. So Brian, I take your advice, but boy, I really don't want to have to do that hard work.
I think you're right. There's tools that do this, right? There's tools that will instantly get rid of duplicate files on your local computer if you were to do the local file thing. So there's tools. There's tools to help you with this. There's tools with the metadata. You're not doing this all manually one by one. Please don't do that. But I think you make a valid point, Andy, that like have a plan and decide what the best day to do it, and definitely start thinking about what your single source of truth is, especially if you're working on projects with work. What you don't want to find out is that there should be one single version that rules them all, but people have downloaded them to their local computers only to find out that those digital assets are incorrect. I'll give you a perfect example of that, right? Like literally the next day, we have this great guy that works for a company, Scale, this guy, Jeff. And I learned pretty quickly with Jeff. We worked together the entire 4 years I've been at Scaled, and Jeff is a designer. He is great when it comes to graphic arts and stuff like that. Well, I will typically throw things together for visualization purposes in a Canva or whatever. And I quickly realized that is not the way to work with Jeff. And I lovingly say that because Jeff would just like, Brian, like we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't put that color there. We wouldn't that. And so, you realize, okay, look, there's a path here and it needs to go through Jeff. And just recently, they just decided to like organize that in a way through Canva, through this organization. So like if I submit things, there's no way for me to download the image in Canva without it getting approved by Jeff first. That's correct. It might be a little bit more annoying on my side, but that's the right way to do that, is to make sure it all goes through Jeff's desk and he gives it his approval. What I worry about with this is that if people don't start thinking about those plans in place, it gets difficult because you're going to be asking to request data, and Claude may not know what the correct one to do is and pull back. And with digital assets, it's just becoming easier and easier to amass them. So, that's where my brain goes with this. But yes, to your point, Andy, I think it's valid. Don't do.
I have a question for all of you. Let's just share what you would use MCP for now. Like if you're going to do an experiment, whether for a business client or whether it's for your own useful purposes, what would you use MCP to do?
Well, we talked about the call we had last night for the team. That's obviously like, that would be one of them, right? Got to clean the data first, but then using it for those purposes, which for our listeners would be like, once all the transcripts, all 350 plus transcripts from the show are organized and clean the correct way, then obviously using MCP to be able to pull from that database, that local database, and ask questions against it and compare and contrast. I think that's a super easy one to do. But I would also just love to do something local with the like local files. I moved from computer to computer over the years. Things get backed up and dumped into one file that then becomes backup of Brian's old Acer computer or whatever. And then you go, what the hell's in there? Is it relevant? So something like that, like creating some sort of system to help me organize and go through the data that I already do have in the file systems and stuff, ask questions against it. I think that'd be kind of cool. That's just me.
So I will say that kind of a similar answer, but for the thumbnails, because the thumbnails right now are pretty much all hosted in Canva where we make them. But we have some series, right? We have our news roundup series. We have the biweekly recap kind of things. There are patterns in the thumbnails as well, and that would be really helpful to be able to go and look at and see how we presented something visually and maybe refer back to it.
I think one thing from the municipal client which would be really interesting would be using an MCP to integrate into either public transport schedule, roadwork updates, and then see if you can actually recommend any like real time, like I guess traffic light adjustments or alternative routes. Why I thought about this is, there's certain lights that are like, why is it this long? And then there's other lights you're like, holy cow, I don't think that was 20 seconds. We gotta go. You gotta go. So it'd be interesting to be able to adjust just purely the traffic light allocations in real time based on all the public transport data or the traffic data based on season, weekend, weekday, and it adjusts accordingly rather than, or it adjusts, makes recommendations, and then whoever needs to, manually adjust it. But that'd be really interesting because then you localize that experiment to say one neighborhood, start small and see what happens. Oh, it's been maybe 5% more efficient. Oh, that's great. Let's expand it. So now you have like an actual real time review of all this data that actually impacts something small, nothing too like crazy or too big, and then maybe you can think about other things you can take from that.
So
Yeah.
Anthropic also released computer use a couple weeks ago, right? These are different and is that true? Computer use, the recommendation was you need to create a virtual instance so that
Recommend you to.
Yeah.
They recommend you to. Yes.
That's what I mean. Because that's really exposing and has the ability to melt your
Yes.
whole computer. This is not the same thing with that. We're not recommending, or are we recommending it's another virtual instance? Because then, like, keeping it local is not helpful unless you move the data that you want to access into the virtual instance, right?
That's certainly safer, but I don't think it would be necessary with MCP because it's not doing things on your behalf while you're essentially away from the computer. And I think the idea of a runaway train with computer use is sort of what Anthropic's like, hey, make sure you know what it has access to and not. And like that's the main reason I haven't deployed it yet, because I remember even after we talked about it, I was like, hey Jimmy, help me set up a virtual instance. Actually, I think what I'll do though, to be honest with you, is since my daughter doesn't watch this show, my daughter was asking for a MacBook for Christmas. And so we bought her a used MacBook that has at least the M1 chip. Yeah, like don't tell my daughter, right? Don't go to her school and tell my daughter. And as a used M1 Mac chip, just look at the 20 version. Anyway, my point to saying that is my old laptop that's in her room would then not be used. And I think that would be a great laptop to wipe and then set up just its own local thing and then run computer use on there, because like it can only go so far and it's not going to have access to my Google Drive and things like that. I'll just virtually, like in my mind, I think there's a great experiment here, even for the Daily AI show. And I need this a lot of times too with like clients. I really should create an entire virtual company. And truthfully, like with your expertise, Andy and Karl and Beth and Jimmy and Aaron and what I know and stuff like that. it would take time, but you know you could do it with an LLM. You could create virtual data sets, virtual, like all fake. But if you did that, what you've essentially created is a great sandbox to then demonstrate to other people how this all works. Because oftentimes what happens is you go, oh, I could show you that, but geez, I can't use my another client's data to show you that. That's not okay. I can't expose that. So I can wash it, and I can take out all the stuff. But ultimately, my whole point to this is like I see a world where you do that. You create a fake company, Acme, right? With enough of the parts and pieces of marketing and sales and different parts of a typical maybe SaaS type business. You do that on a localized, desk or localized computer where you can start to play with some of these things without fear of it getting outside the box or really truly hurting anything. Because then you could actually demo stuff and you would never have to worry about it. We're like, well, this is Acme. None of this is real. So there's no harm. It can't, if it escapes, it still can't harm anybody. It's still fake, So I think that's sort of where I would like to see eventually, whether I actually ever do that or not. But I mean, truthfully, it's easier than ever with LLMs. I mean, I've had LLMs create me fake databases 100 times. I've had ChatGPT say, just create some fake information I needed to prove this point or to demo this point or to teach it or whatever, but I can't use any real stuff, So I don't know. I'm excited about that, but I think maybe that'll be a fun project for 2025 is to, start building that. Just looking in the comments here to see if we have anything else from the company provides. Oh, Jude was talking about the lights. Yeah, that whole idea of like the street lights and getting that all together. He's saying there's a company called Rhythm something, but he's saying he doesn't know how smart it is or whatever. Yeah. And then Gwen said AI agencies now exist. Is that what Brian is referring to? AI agencies. I'm not sure what you mean, Gwen. I don't know if you guys know what maybe she means by that. Like AI agencies now exist.
Don't know. Are you talking about agency, like as an agents or
At agent AI services or agents? I'm not sure. Sorry, Gwen. I'm not sure on that one. Otherwise, I'd be happy to ask it. Throw it in the comments though, and even if we don't get to it today, this is a good segue for tomorrow. Tomorrow is our 3-week recap show. Normally we would call that our 2-week, but we missed a week with the holiday and stuff. So tomorrow we'll be going back over this topic as well as many others. I know there's stuff from yesterday that Andy, you didn't get a chance to get to. And that's why we put this sort of stopgap show in about every other Friday. Because there's stuff that happens all the time. Jude or Justin was saying it in the comments about this 12 days of Christmas thing that just showed up from OpenAI and Sam Altman saying that, basically every day at 10 a.m. Pacific for starting today, 12/5, if you're not listening to us live, for 12 days, they're going to do live demos. Some things he was going to call quote unquote stocking stuffers, and other things are actually going to be kind of like legit demos or new releases of ChatGPT.
One launch. One launch.
Let's see. So that's cool, right? That's interesting. And so those are the kind of things that happen even after we have live shows about it or that don't line up with our news shows. So that'll all be tomorrow. Tons to talk about. I will not probably be here, but the rest of the crew, I think, as everybody else, I think it's going to be here. And so we'll have a lot of great conversations. I look forward to watching that on the replay myself. With that, we'll wrap it up for today. Come on back tomorrow. Like I said, don't forget, you can go to thedailyishow.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there. Another great resource for just kind of digging in and learning in different areas, similar to the show, but we go deeper. We tell you why it's relevant to you. We get into a whole bunch of other stuff in there. Always put conundrums in there, which I always personally love because it just makes you think when there's not a clear answer to it. And AI is filled with questions that do not have clear answers. So that's always fun too. So go sign up for that. It's free. Comes out every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern is when we publish it live. So pretty much if you sign up before then, you're in good shape. You'll get the next edition that goes out. With that, we'll wrap it up today. This is a great conversation. I am sure we'll be talking about the MCP even more, especially as we get an opportunity to start building out with it and doing some fun stuff. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. You guys all have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye.